Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Robin. My Instagram handle is Mother Pixels. That's where you'll see most of my landscape work. So I am a photographer based out of Calgary, Alberta. And today what I will be talking about is I'll be guiding you through how to shoot Northern Lights. So the 5 topics that I will cover in this short video are 1, the gear that you need, 2, the camera settings, 3, how to focus at night, especially for capturing Northern Lights, which is not easy to get your camera to focus at night, but there's a couple techniques that you can do. 4, when can you see them? And it's not just necessarily the season, but an app and other resources that you can use in order to find them. And 5, where to see them. So 4 is when to see them, 5 is where to see them. And although I'll be giving some very general tips on how to find them, I will be getting a little bit more specific about how to find them here in Alberta. So without further ado, let's get to it. So first things first, we're going to talk about gear, the gear that you need. So I have 2 cameras. You can use a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. I have a Nikon Z5, so I have a mirrorless camera. And then I have my crop sensor camera. So don't think that you need a full frame camera to capture Northern Lights. The lens is really important. I have here a 20mm wide angle lens, and on my crop, I have a 10 to 20 wide angle lens. So you definitely need a wide angle lens. Secondly, preferably something that is fast. So for example, you want something that's 2.8 f-stop or even faster. Now this one is 1.8. So that is fantastic because it's all about shutter speed and ISO. And I'll get a little bit more into that. But then my crop sensor, it's not 2.8. My 10 to 20 wide angle lens is actually 3.5. So what happens is when you have 1.8, a super fast wide angle lens, I am able to keep my ISO pretty low for night photography. That means I can probably shoot a Northern Light at f1.8, 10 seconds, 8 to 10 seconds, 5 seconds, and keep my ISO at about 1,000. And so of course, you know, when you have your ISO low, it introduces less noise to your photo, right? So if your ISO is too high, your photo tends to get a little bit noisier, a little bit grainier. And so the goal is to try and keep that ISO as low as possible. And you can really achieve that if you can bring your f-stop low. But for example, for this one, because it's a 10 to 20, but the lowest my f-stop can go is 3.5, not the desired 2.8 and below. That means I have to crank up my ISO. You can still do it, and in Lightroom, you can still bring down the noise by raising your luminance option in Lightroom. Like there's ways to denoise it a little bit in Lightroom, but you always want to, you always prefer to get the shot right in frame. Then you will need maybe a shutter remote release. This is not necessary because you will rarely get your seconds, your exposure over 30 seconds, especially if you're shooting Northern Lights. Typically you want to stay between 5 and 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds if it's a super slow moving aurora, but between 5 and 10 seconds. So this is a great tool if you want to reduce camera shake, if you just want to sit there clicking on the button and you don't have to push down on the button on your camera. Because every time you push down the button on your camera, you can introduce some camera shake. So with this, at least you're not touching your camera, you're just clicking the button. Alternatively, you can just set a 2-second timer on here. So when you push down on the button, there's a 2-second delay, and then you can just not have your camera shaking and then reduce the chances of you having that blurry vision, that blurry photo. And so aside from this, of course, you'll need a tripod because with any long exposure, you will need a tripod. So if you don't have a wide angle lens, maybe you decided that you just want to start getting into photography, maybe into astrophotography, which is not for everybody. And you're like, well, I don't want to go spend thousands of dollars on a wide angle lens. You can rent one. So you can go to the camera store here in Calgary and you can rent lenses wherever you are. Just go to camera stores. Some camera stores do have a rental program, so you can just go and rent lenses for like 20-30 bucks a day, and then you can go test it out and see if this is just like a once in a lifetime thing that you've always wanted to capture a northern light, but you don't necessarily want to invest $1,000 in a brand new lens. You don't have to. You can just go rent a lens, take your picture, scratch it off your bucket list, and call it a day. Okay, now we're going to talk about camera settings, which I briefly touched upon. So a pretty normal standard ratio would be to do like a 5-second exposure, ISO 1600, f the widest aperture you can get, whether that's 3.5 or 2.8 or 1.8. So that's your baseline. Try with that. If it's a very slow moving northern light, I like to do my exposures for 10 seconds because I like to see the streaking across the sky when it's really slow. I'll do like 10 seconds, okay? And because I'm doing 10 seconds, I could bring my ISO down a little bit more, down to like 800 to 1000. Again, I'm using f1.8, okay? So if it's a super fast moving aurora, there's a lot of action and it's coming at you real quick, then you might want to do 5 seconds and start with that and see what you're capturing. And then if you have your aperture the widest it can be, whether that's 1.8, 2.8, or 3.5, and you're at 5 seconds, if it's too dark, then you're just going to have to increase and crank up that ISO. If it's too bright, then you just bring down that ISO. So the ISO is what you're playing with, basically. Also, another camera setting that somebody told me is typically when they tell you, oh, set your white balance when you're shooting northern lights to sunlight. So that's what I was doing. I was setting my auto balance to sunlight. But then a professional photographer friend of mine, I'm going to give you a shout out right now. Her name is Danny Banff. Danny on Instagram. Danny Banff on Instagram. She's amazing and she knows her shit. She's like, no, I do fluorescent or incandescent, the light bulb one. I'll double check and I'll put it on here. And my photos went from having like an orange yellow tint in my images to a more teal bluish tone in my images just by changing the white balance. So I liked the look with the incandescent light, or is it fluorescent? A lot better than I did with the sunlight one, like a lot better. I barely had to edit my photos just by changing that white balance from sunlight to the other one, to the indoor light one. So there's a couple of ways that you can go about focusing in the dark. So one, you can go and set up during blue hour and basically, focus, and then always set to manual. Always set to manual focus, because autofocus at night, it's not going to work. What's going to happen is if you leave it in autofocus and you start trying to press the shutter button, your camera is not going to be able to find anything. It's just going to say can't take the photo. It will refuse to take the photo. Or if it does, it might not focus on what you actually want it to focus, and then the photo might come out completely blurry anyways, or out of focus. So you always switch to manual, so you can go during blue hour, set up your composition, find your foreground, find how you're gonna set it up, and then wait. And sometimes you can sit there waiting, especially if blue hour for you is like 7, 8 o'clock at night, and then you don't see northern lights until midnight. So you can do that, okay? That's one. Not my style. I don't have that kind of patience. Secondly, I love getting multiple different compositions. I like to take advantage. I don't just stay in one spot. So then the second way that you can focus is, if it allows, this lens does not allow me, is to focus to infinity. So again, set your lens. This lens does allow me to do that. I do use this sometimes for astrophotography, is to set your focus manual, of course, and then set it to infinity. So that's that 8 shape. I'm gonna see if I can put it up there, but you basically play with your focus ring and you focus to infinity. And so that's just basically gonna tell your camera to focus to the stars and beyond, which is where you wanna focus anyways. And then the third way that you can focus is to focus on the brightest star on the sky. So just look for it and try to focus on the brightest star in the sky if possible, and then Finally, the last way to focus is to focus through the back of your camera on your screen. Just if you have like the back focus in a digital screen, you can go ahead and push and see if you can get your camera to focus, and you do that again, manual focus. All right, now how to know when to see one. First, let me put in a caveat. Yes, there's northern lights, and yes, you can see them. However, sometimes you will arrive at the scene, and this was a shock for me, something I did not know and did not expect. So I want to manage your expectations right now, is that sometimes you'll show up and you can actually not see the northern lights with your eyes, but your camera will pick it up. So that was a surprise for me. I had never seen northern lights. I was really excited. I heard they were out. I went out and I was like, where are they? And a friend of mine told me, that's it. And it was just a faint white glow. So it wasn't very strong. It wasn't, I guess, dark enough for where I was. I guess I maybe had to go further north or somewhere further away, and they had to be really strong. But I was personally expecting to see a green sky with purple and all this, and no, it was just a faint white glow. And that was my very first experience. But when can you see northern lights? You can see them from September to April. At least here in Alberta, that's aurora season, from September to April. And typically when the light goes down, so around 10, 11, midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, that's when you'll be able to see them. Now, when do you know that they'll be out dancing? So there's a couple of things that you can do, and I'm gonna show you right now. So I basically, because it is such an effort for me to go out shoot auroras, I have a couple of safety plans. One is an app, and it's called Aurora, and I'm actually going to do a screen record and I'm going to show you. So this is the Aurora app, right? You put in your location, so you go to forecast, right? It already knows my location, and so there's a couple of things that you need to look for. One, it says cloud coverage. You see how here it's saying cloud coverage of what? 76, 84, 92%, you know, at night, which is when you would see them. You do not want that kind of cloud coverage, because even if they're out and they're in full bloom and they're dancing for you all night and you have like KP5, KP6, when you have cloud coverage this bad, you're very unlikely to see them. So you might as well keep your pants on and keep sleeping. Now it says next hour realistic 3.3, 3.5, upcoming days. It says maximum potential 2, 3, 2. These numbers are not good. What you want to see is KP4 to 6, okay? So when I go to long-term forecast, I'm just going to swipe, and here it says that on August 24th, again, I'm doing this video super early in the season. So if I was doing this video during Christmas, we'd see a lot more. But it says Tuesday 24th, there's 4, okay? 5, 6 is really where the good stuff comes in, but 4, you'll still be able to catch something. So that's how you are able to see when the auroras are coming. Make sure you check the cloud coverage, and then there's viewing probability on there as well, okay? So that's one way to check it. The second way is that I also joined this Facebook group, and I'm sure that there are some Facebook groups in your area, but in Alberta, there's the Alberta Aurora Chasers, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about this group. Okay, so here we have the Alberta Aurora Chasers group, and so you have to join. Basically, there is a moderator here that tells you, hey, listen, tonight, this is what we're predicting. We think it's going to be really good. And then people start commenting on the thread, right? And they start sharing photos, right? And so it's like, oh, too smoky. How does it look for tonight? Any chances, right? People share their images, and basically you get real-time information on here. So whenever there's a strong forecast on my app, I also double check on the Alberta Aurora Chasers Facebook group, because these people are pro, they do it all the time. And so this is a really great Facebook group to join if you're based out of Alberta. But believe me, there's probably a Facebook group everywhere that you can find auroras in the world. Now I'm going to get into where to find them. So like I said, you first need to go to a remote location that has very little light pollution. You're like, okay, great. But the second thing that you need is to be facing northeast, okay? So if you are like me and you don't know where northeast is, then you will want to use the compass on your phone, which somebody reminded me of. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I had that app on my phone. So what you do is you go to your compass. I don't know where northeast is. Standing right here, I don't know where northeast is, especially when you're thinking about coming up with a composition. If you're looking for a lake and a mountain and a beautiful backdrop, you need to know where northeast is. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything. So here we go, northeast. I use the compass on my phone. It tells me that northeast is over there. Something I would never know. I would never know. So use the compass on your phone when you're out in a dark location. Point northeast, set up your composition right there, set up your camera pointing northeast, and that is one. Also, you can use this if you're in Alberta. There's a map posted on the Alberta Facebook group where here you can see it's a public map, and people have pinned basically the locations where they have taken photos of the aurora that they like. So they have Solo Tree, you can see all these just random locations. Anywhere that you can see, you click here, you basically, it just tells you a little bit about the area, and then you can go and click and drive there, and you can go take pictures of the aurora there. So, Jesus, that's a hard word to say, aurora. So, anyways, this is the map that you can use to go find the aurora, the northern lights there. However, one caveat, I actually went here and I decided to check some of the locations in my area, and I did not like it. Like, somebody had written that down as a great composition with some rocks and a little lake, and I drove out, like I used one of the pin locations. I went out there and I was like, this is it. I did not like it. So I started driving around that area and I actually found better compositions that I liked, and I pinned them on my phone as locations, and so now they're unique to me. But just because somebody thinks that that's great, don't immediately assume that it's great. So I recommend that if you see some locations pinned, go check them out during the day, because they might either exceed your expectations and you want to set up and take photos of the northern lights there, or when you arrive, if you didn't check it out before, you might be like, this was that awesome tree that somebody thought it would be great, or this was that pond people thought it was great. So really check it out before. But the best tip that I can give you for finding them is, aside from going somewhere far away and having your compass for northeast, is to go early during the day and set up your composition, set up your shots, like know where you're going to go, plan, because there's nothing more annoying than doing this at night and seeing the northern lights suddenly playing and panicking and not having a good composition to set up. So I did that my second time that I went out shooting. I actually went prepared. I knew the lakes, I knew the spots, I planned my shots, I took my Loom Cube to do some cool new ideas, and I was not frantic, I was not in a panic. I was able to set up my shots, and my second time shooting northern lights went a lot better than my first one. My first one, I would almost describe it as a disappointment, because I just went where everybody else went, and that was Lake Minnewanka, because I had seen so many people talk about Lake Minnewanka, and I'm like, oh, for sure I'll be able to see northern lights there. Yes, you can see them. But when I went there were about 200 or 300 other people there as well. Okay, and so the cars driving by and parking were contaminating every single one of my photos. When it wasn't a car, it was a person walking in front with their flashlight, or the light from them setting up their camera, because everybody's working in the dark. So everybody's setting up their camera, everybody's trying out their own thing. Honestly, I took about 150 photos and I had about 2 usable ones. So the biggest lesson for me the second time was, I'm gonna go, and I'm not gonna go to the popular locations that people tend to list and gravitate, because that's just a disaster. So my best advice is to plan. Grab your phone, grab your compass on your phone, drive around earlier during the day facing northeast, go away with leave locations that are super popular and go set up your own unique shots. I promise you it'll be a much better, a much more relaxing and more creative experience for you. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this video, that you learned a lot from it. I'm trying to share with you the lessons that I learned, the mistakes that I made. And so if you like this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, as I will be posting a lot more photography tips, editing tips, adventures, and more. Thanks again.